Okay, folks, my name is Dan Dermasic. I'm the coordinator for the Rochester Coalition for Public Education, and we're happy that you're all here tonight. It's kind of like giving a party and not many people came, but we're glad you're here because you're really concerned, and that's what's important. So, with that, I'd like to also recognize both Great Schools for All and the Southwest Common Council Education Committee that helped us with this. But most of all, the Brockport Department of Education, Human Services, and Health was enormously helpful for us to make this happen. We couldn't have done it without them. So, what I'd like to do now is introduce you to the Dean of Education, Health and Human Services, and that's Tom Hernandez. Tom, can you come up, say a few words?
Good afternoon. Sorry, I had to check. Well, my job is really easy. I get to just say welcome. I know you were saying something about a small group, but truthfully, any party is better than none. As Dean of the School of Education, Health and Human Services here at the College of Brockport, it's truly a pleasure for me to welcome you all to have this conversation, or series of conversations. You know, the college at Brockport has been training teachers and preparing individuals to go into education careers since its inception in 1835. We have a long history, obviously, of doing this kind of work. Many people would argue that it's our very reason for being as an institution. We are truly pleased to be able to facilitate, or at least to be a part of this conversation, to encourage meaningful change within our schools that are so central to the community. The Rochester Coalition for Public Education has proposed 11 recommendations to improve educational experiences for students. I'm certain that we are going to have a meaningful discussion about those. That said, the School of Education, Health and Human Services here at the college has always sought to further dialogues within our community to improve educational experiences and to help all students develop, grow, and succeed in their own lives. It is, after all, individual growth that social change and community betterment becomes possible with. It's our hope that by facilitating this open discussion, we will further an opportunity for members of our community to engage in this very dialogue with the progress of our own community's schools in mind. So in advance, I thank you for your efforts, your thoughts, your time, and most importantly, your voices. So I will turn things back. Thank you.
All right, before we get started with our presentations on the 11 recommendations we have, I want to tell you a little bit about the Rochester Coalition for Public Education. We're composed of teachers, parents, of Rochester students, retired administrators, former superintendents, college professors of education, and concerned citizens. Approximately 3 years ago, a group of us met because we were so taken by the New York State movement, opt-out movement, in terms of protesting against high-stakes standardized testing and the Common Core that a group of us got together and formed the coalition. But we decided that we were also going to commit ourselves to educate the public about research, other research-based progressive education reform, particularly focusing on what policies, curriculum, assessment, teaching and learning strategies, and school organizations best met the needs of urban students. When the mayor and others began to advocate for a state takeover of Board of Education, we met with Assembly members Harry Bronson, Jamie Romeo, Regents Chancellor Betty Rosa, Regent Wade Norwood and Commissioner Elia to make suggestions, alternative suggestions to the state takeover. We strongly believe in maintaining the rights of Rochester's citizens to elect a school board. We believe it's a dangerous, slippery slope to begin eliminating democratically elected bodies and replace them with top-down political appointees. During our conversation, we were encouraged to develop our own list of recommendations for the legislature and the Board of Regents to consider. Our coalition enthusiastically took on that task. What you're about to hear from our presenters are the 11 research-based recommendations that we believe will help Rochester students grow and develop more significantly. Will it solve all the problems that we're facing in Rochester? No, it will not. But these recommendations will make things much better for students, both academically, socially, and emotionally. We know that the long history of institutional racism and classism has placed students and their families in their present conditions, very often with poverty and associated trauma. Housing, health, employment, transportation, and our criminal justice systems must also be reformed to wish to see the elimination of the achievement and economic gaps that currently exist in our country. What we are proposing is only the beginning of the reforms needed to make up the regional decisions that have resulted in separate and unequal schools. The format that we're going to use tonight is that you're going to hear 11 short presentations, followed by a series of small group discussions in which you can give feedback on the recommendations to improve them, to modify them, to add to them, whatever it might be. The coalition is really looking for this kind of feedback because we haven't approached the community yet other than having the discussions ourselves. So with that, let's get on with the presentations. Our first presenter is a county legislator and also former superintendent of East Rochester Central School District, Howie Mafucci. Howie?
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. As some of you may know, Dan just told you actually, I'm a retired superintendent of schools and currently a county legislator. This afternoon is about no more tinkering. It's time for real, systematic change within the Rochester City School District. As a superintendent of schools, I had success with a simple planning process. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How are you paying for it? What do we want to do? We want New York State to appoint 2 skilled educational leaders to the Rochester City School District. One would have expertise in urban education, and the other superior knowledge of urban school finance. These 2 highly experienced professional educators would work in the district for 2 years to help bring about research-based change in student academic and social and emotional achievement. The educational leaders will assist the district superintendent and the Board of Education in achieving systematic change in the district to improve student achievement and help mitigate trauma associated with high concentrations of poverty, adversely impacting student achievement and social well-being. Why do we want that? First, in a very well-documented report from Jamie Aquino, the Board of Education does not act as a unified body. As a result, superintendents have to manage individual board members rather than work with a unified board to support student academic, social, and emotional needs. Superintendents then concentrate on satisfying separate requests from individual board members at the expense of the vital work of the district. Also, it's apparent superintendents can only tinker around improvements before leaving the district. Next, superintendents are highly qualified and knowledgeable people. They are generally skillful in instruction, finance, and human relations. However, even the best need a coach or a critical friend. One only has to look at the game of golf. Even Tiger Woods, who won this past weekend, by the way, has a coach. The evidence of dysfunction is clear. The district has had 5 superintendents in the last 10 years, and other senior level district leaders come and go regularly. Those changes make it challenging to implement consistent and sustainable improvement. All that results in bureaucratic complacency. The superintendent and board must have go-to people with the authority to ensure focus always remains on high-quality instruction, promoting student achievement and well-being within the financial resources of the district. So, how to pay for this? How to pay for this recommendation? The state needs to pay the bill. The recent Hempstead School District bill by our state legislature assigned educational leaders to that district, and the state is paying for all three. This recommendation is about no more tinkering. It's time for real, systematic change within the Rochester City School District. A formal state takeover will not do that. The appointment of two skillful educational leaders is the best way to ensure superintendent and Board of Education success. Thank you.
All right. Our next presenter is it's a grandparent advocate. This is Walida Monroe Sims, and she's going to talk to us about improving the relationship between parents and schools. So, is that here?
No.
Okay, well, we're going to wait then and see if Walida comes later. Okay, moving right along. All right, we're on recommendation number 3, and this is by John Boutte, who's the director, chair of the Southwest Common Council Education Committee. And he's going to be talking to us about community schools and busing. John?
Okay. Gee, I got a promotion. Two things I'm going to talk about. One is busing and the other one
Get the mic, please.
One is busing and the other one is community schools. We have a situation in Rochester that really keeps parents from getting involved with their child's school. If we had the state make a declaration that poor parents can't attend their child's school, we'd all be up in arms. But we really have an equivalent situation that kind of falls on 3 things. One is the 1.5 mile reimbursement rule for schools that bus kids. The state will reimburse 90% of the cost if the ride is longer than 1.5 miles. Well, in Rochester, there's always a school that's 1.5 miles away. The second thing is the increased fear of our streets that parents have. Some of it legitimate, some of it exaggerated. We get so much news through all sorts of media these days that we see boogeymen even where they're not. And the third thing is, in 2002, the managed school choice policy was introduced to Rochester, which allowed parents to pick the school that they think their child would do best in, and if there was room there, they could get in. If there wasn't, the names were put into a lottery. And it soon became obvious to parents that they can pick a school that's a fair distance from where they live, and their child will be safe, picked up at the door, taken to that school. But then, given the poverty in our school system, they can't always get to their child's school when there's an event or when they want to possibly volunteer. So this has really put a crimp in neighborhood schools in Rochester and a real challenge for anybody trying to start a community school. Now, neighborhood schools basically mean that you have primarily kids from the neighborhood attending. For community schools, however, the defining thing is that you have a lot of wraparound services that try to make up for the poverty in the district. And they can work well in good neighborhoods also, but you might, for instance, have a medical facility with the school, or dental, more people to deal with emotional problems that the kids may come to school with. These wraparound services are great, but if you, and the other thing that they try to do is get parents in the community involved with the school. Well, if most of your parents are too far to commute to the school, you have difficulty getting parents in. So getting improved busing so that anybody who wants to go to the nearby school, whether it's a neighborhood school or community school, can choose that. That means that if the child misses the bus someday, they can walk 3 blocks over. If the parent needs to get to the school for a teacher conference, they can walk over also. So this is one of the things that we're working with. School 17 has been a big model for us, and they're making great steps forward. They've gotten an exemption from the 1.5 mile rule to get some students bused from closer in, and when they got their local enrollment in K through 3 up from 22% to 77%, they also saw the mushrooming of parent participation. I couldn't stop here. One thing that we'll cover when we break up into groups is we've got a graphic here that shows you just how terrible a 1.5 mile walk is, because I don't think too many of you would want to walk that distance, and it really does stifle participation in the neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Our next presenter, I will lead it.
I'm sorry, I'm a mom.
Walid is also a parent of Rochester City Schools students and also a parent advocate.
You
Walid?
can go on up.
Good afternoon, or good evening. My apologies for being late. I had to leave a meeting and pick my son up and take him to the after-school program. But with that all being set aside, today I wanted you to, I'm more of an interactive person. Step back, let me tell you, my name is Walida Monroe Sims. I have a total of 8 children with my husband, and we have 5 grandchildren. Currently, I have 2 sons in the district, and I have grandchildren in the district. Our oldest child is 26, so I've been around quite some time, not telling my age. However, I'm more of an interactive individual, even though I know we're going to be breaking out into groups, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time on addressing the issues and the barriers as it relates to parent connections in our district. However, I am going to touch on it, and I'm also going to address some of the solutions, in my opinion, and some of the barriers that as a parent I have faced. But however, the reason why you see on the screen the mission and the vision statement is because, in my opinion, something's missing. So when we break out into groups, we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. But if you can focus just briefly and just put in your minds what you see as it relates to parent partnerships, what is it there? So, number 1, not having parents and community a part of the Rochester City School District's vision and mission statement is the number 1 barrier, in my opinion. Currently, parents are working in silos that are actually created amongst district. They may or may not know that. The district is not inclusive to all parents, and when I say that, there's criteria to be involved as a parent. Parents don't need permission to be parents. So why do I have to fill out an application to be a part of a parent committee at a building or district level? Yet, you have barriers that state lack of parent engagement. I'm just saying. Accessibility to information. So So regardless of what an individual may feel, I'm going to use the opt-out. Not saying how much indulged I am with that. However, that is information that parents should know. There's a lot of information within the district, according to the ESSA, that parents should know. However, parents are not being informed. There are parent groups, however, many of them are not being utilized in the capacity to empower, educate, or come up with strategic plans and recommendations to work with the Board of Education. So that's a barrier for parents as well. So that's why when I talk about silos and lack of inclusion, that's where I'm going with that. Also, the ability to meet parents where they are. We talk about that all day long, but what does that actually look like? How is the district working with parents who are not able to utilize their online system? This is just an example. What are you doing about that? Because as a parent, I've called many times and they'll say, oh, it's on our website. Okay, I get on my website and then now we are navigating. We need navigation for the website. So, and then also I'm going to wrap it up because we can have this conversation further as it relates to the vision and the mission of the Rochester City School District. And also, in my opinion, that's not a vision statement. And maybe as parents, we can come together in community to actually address what that looks like for us as it relates to their mission and vision statement. But I'm going to get back to meeting parents where they are. If the district was able to do that and really tap into the not just barriers or not just the issues, but really understanding and knowing the parent's role, instead of just utilizing that and saying those things, how are you actually implementing that process? So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to digging a little bit deeper as you sit with me. It's going to be a very interactive activity that we could actually hope to utilize in at the Rochester City School District. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alita. So with that, Vicki Robertson, who is a parent and also a parent advocate, is here to talk about dealing with racism, sexism, and all the other isms in the district that we need to deal with. Vicki?
Okay, devise a plan to address all those isms. Wow. Yeah, so first thing I want to do as I talk about racism and sexism and etc. is to acknowledge that here I am, a white, cis, middle-class woman. Most of those isms don't apply to me. I come from a place of a lot of privilege, and so people might be asking, why is she talking about this? Good question. One reason is Coalition for Public Ed doesn't have that many people of color, so you get me. Another reason is most of the staff and administration of the RCSD are people that look a lot like me. So maybe I am the right person to be talking about this, to be talking to with my peers, because I think that's one of the jobs of white people is to talk with other white people. So first thing, it's kind of a no-brainer. We need to do something about all those isms. They're real. A lot of times people try to say, oh, it's just the concentration of poverty. No, the concentration of poverty came about because of racism. My kids, as Dan said, have gone to Rochester City Schools, from School 12. My son just graduated from Wilson High School. My daughter's a sophomore at Wilson there. And so I'm very familiar with their experiences at RCSD. But they had different, I found often, not always, people had different expectations of my kids. People had different expectations of me. I was allowed to get angry and not consider, ooh, she's that angry black woman, I gotta be scared of her. My kids got to see themselves in the curriculum, you know, except for maybe during February when we did Black History Month. My kids had teachers that looked a lot like them most of the time, and so they had no problems imagining themselves in that kind of role. So you can see there's a lot of differences out there. And it's real and we need to address it. Does that mean that I think everybody in RCSD is a bigot? No. I think our culture is. We grow up, we breathe it in, we're carefully taught. And we need to find ways to fight against it, to be anti-racists. And there's good work happening within the RCSD. I'm sure there's going to be stuff I forget, but I know that within the Restorative Justice Program Ruth Turner leads, they've got some amazing work going on. Howard Eagle and the Real Group have done some good things. Howard sometimes drives me nuts, but he's got great ideas. You gotta listen. There's implicit bias training, Joy DeGrew, and within individual schools, there's lots of great work doing. But we need to do better. We need to find ways to integrate things, and we need to find ways, I challenge throughout this meeting, think about it. Listen, if you've got people of color or people with disabilities or people that are different from you at your table, make sure you're really listening and not discounting. Believe them what they say. Because that's the only way we're going to really make change, is to really work hard to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-classist, anti-homophobic, and anti-religious intolerance. So I look forward to talking more later. Thank you.
Wow. It's me, I'm up next. Thanks, Vicki. Wow, I put the agenda together and I didn't know I was next. Wow. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering about this advisory board, and I'm sure there's a number of people who are probably saying, are you kidding me? An advisory board is actually going to produce a significant difference with education in the Rochester City School District? My answer is yes, it can happen, because this would be a different type of advisory committee. Currently, the advisory committees on the Board of Education are temporary. They exist for 90 days and then they're disbanded, and sometimes the reports are kept and used, sometimes they're not. More often than not, they're not used. This would require a monthly meeting with this advisory board, who would report to the board on research that has been found to effectively help poor kids, mainly poor kids of color and other kids in the district, to learn effectively, to grow significantly in terms of academic, social, and emotional issues. Topics would be jointly determined by the advisory committee, the Board of Education, and the superintendent. For example, the superintendent might want the advisory board to present perhaps on alternatives to high-stakes standardized testing. Maybe the board wants something in terms of what are the best starting times for elementary kids to start school and for secondary kids as well. Maybe the advisory board determines that perhaps maybe we need to know about what learner-centered schools are and the research that accompanies that. In addition to that, this advisory board would have another function, and that would be to hear from community groups that want to start new, innovative schools or programs. And this would be important because right now, you know, not only are kids looking for something that's more intrinsically motivating for them to engage and learn, but also the fact that right now, charter schools, private schools, even the urban-suburban transfer program is draining money as well as kids and parents away from the district. We need to deal with that. And maybe the best way to deal with that is not only to make all schools better, but also to create some new exciting programs that kids would be more interested in engaging in. The advisory board would be anchored by a professor of education from each of the local colleges, 2 teachers and 2 administrators from the RTA and ASAR, 2 human development experts from the Children's Agenda, and 2 from the Monroe County Social Services, 2 parents from the Parents Advisory Council, 2 students from the Student Advisory Board, and 2 mayoral appointees. Additionally, presentations by this advisory council that would take place once a month on these research-based topics would be open to the public. That way, the public, citizens of Rochester, who say, you know, that was great. How come we're not doing it? Why isn't the board acting upon it, even though it's been advised to them by the advisory board to take action and do it? Because it works with kids. Why not do it? So there'd be a built-in transparency and built-in accountability to this that could further transform education and hopefully transform the Board of Education as well. So, we'll talk more about that because I'm sure you have questions about it and suggestions. Number 6 is Don Barlow, who's the former superintendent of the Dansville Central School District and a nationwide literacy specialist. Don?
Shannon Riley Ayers, probably the 2 best minds for early literacy. Literacy development starts in life and is highly coordinated and correlated with school achievement. One of the things that bothers me, and I've spent a lot of time on this, is that everybody thinks that literacy is learning how to read. Not so. Literacy is learning how to observe and listen and talk, write and read. The experience that I've had in the district, both in the classroom and talking and watching students, is if we had to pick the bigger of the 2 problems, it's not reading, it's writing. Oral language is the foundation for literacy development. The more limited a child's experiences with language and literacy, the more likely he or she will have difficulty reading and writing. That knows no color line. That's for everybody. The reverse is also true. Are we looking for evidence of the need to improve early literacy? Here's one. If I had 10 students in 4th grade right there, sitting in chairs, and I asked the students who are using literacy at grade level to stand up, that would be 2 kids. The more limited a child's experience with language and literacy, the more likely he or she will have difficulty. I'm repeating that because that's the kind of program we need. The recommendation for Early Literacy Policy and Practice Council would need to be led by a literacy specialist, a recognized literacy specialist. The council would include Executive Director of the Early Childhood Program, Dr. Robin Hooper, elementary principals, teachers, literacy coaches, and parents. The council would be responsible, and this is the point that we're not doing, for developing and implementing the research-based early learning standards, curriculum, instructional practices, accountability measures that go beyond the New York State test, and making sure there's a clarity of purpose and a shared vision. We would ensure that pre-kindergarten teachers work closely with kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade teachers. They don't. The Early Literacy Council would report directly to the superintendent. Because as a former superintendent, what is it that I'm there for? Once the children and the staff are safe, I'm looking at learning. Here's my observations. The early literacy curriculum and teaching practice should be evidence-based, integrated with all areas of learning, understandable to staff members. In my opinion, it's not. Much of the success at East High School is because they hired a lot of reading and writing tutors. And the last proof of the problem, and this I find embarrassing, because my grandson and my granddaughter go to the Rochester City School District. Most of our kids who graduate and go to Monroe Community College have to take remedial reading and writing courses. I got you. Why do I feel so strongly about this? I believe that we can help every child to read, but it's tougher today, much tougher. And we need this council to put a focus on early literacy and constantly take a look at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Our next presentation is on Great Schools for All, proposal for inter-district magnet schools. And presenting will be Don Pryor, who's one of the chairs of Great Schools for All. Don?
Thank you, Dan. The Coalition for Public Education and Great Schools for All are strong proponents of expanding choices for all of our community students by creating an evidence-based, best practice network of voluntary, cross-district, public magnet schools, primary and secondary grades, that are intentionally socioeconomically diverse, roughly a 50-50 mix of low and moderate income students, and that offer unique programming not otherwise available in any of our city or suburban schools and the school districts. Examples of public possible magnet schools that have proven successful in other communities include, for example, Leadership Academy, Language Immersion, Visual or Performing Arts, Environmental Science, Public Safety, Public Health, Early College Prep, Technology Development, and various kinds of non-college occupational or apprenticeship programs, and so on. All such schools would be intentionally diverse, consistent with national research findings. Such schools would be collaborative, involving partnerships between city and suburban school districts, which would work together with parents and students to design the schools, share staff and resources, and typically use existing school facilities to minimize costs. Colleges and universities, the business community, and various nonprofit agencies would also be among the partners involved in the development and implementation of such schools. We anticipate that there would be state incentives and assistance in developing these schools, reflecting state policies that promote integration as a key strategy for improving educational outcomes. Why this approach? We favor actually a both-and approach that builds on many of the other important proposals for change that are being promoted in this forum and by other advocates of public education reform. But as part of those reforms, it is critical that we involve the larger community and the resources beyond just city borders if we are to expand options for our students that help mitigate the effects of concentrated poverty in our schools. More than 50 years of national research on best practices at both the national level and in numerous communities throughout the country document clearly that such diverse magnet schools improve the odds of graduation and reduce outcome disparities between low and middle income students and between students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. Recent research also documents that critical thinking and problem-solving skills, creativity, preparation for the more diverse 21st century workforce that's facing us, and various lifelong outcomes such as family stability, job and income security, and reduced criminal justice system involvement all improve for all groups of students exposed to such diverse magnet schools. Why then would we not actively explore such options? One example of a diverse magnet school currently being considered and explored as a pilot project would be a downtown elementary school that would draw students of parents from the city and suburbs who work downtown. Such a school would involve partnerships with city and suburban school districts and potentially such downtown institutions as the Strong Museum of Play, Eastman School, and the Downtown Y. The question is there a market for such diverse magnet schools? And the answer is yes. A recent professionally conducted survey of 600 parents of students equally divided between city and suburban parents indicated overwhelming openness to having their child attend such schools and strong support for a variety of specific types of possible magnet schools, including 3/4 of the respondents who indicated a willingness to send their child to such a diverse school, even if it meant going outside of their home district. Strong support for such schools was consistent across geographic lines, across racial and economic groups, and across income levels. Local support, proven models, and national research all agree. The timing is right. It's time to act. Thank you.
Incidentally, for those of you you're not familiar with the book Children of the Green by Rucker Johnson, I encourage you to look at it because it backs up everything that Don was talking about in terms of research and development. Next presenter is David Hirsch, Professor of Education at the Margaret Warner Graduate School of Education at the U of R, and he's going to talk about high-stakes standardized testing and Common Core. David?
Hi. Good evening. Creating alternative assessments for the last 30 years, both New York State and the federal government have pursued a policy of holding students, teachers, and schools accountable through high-stakes testing. They argue that by making tests high stakes, such as not promoting students to the next grade or from high school, or threatening to place schools in receivership, or disbanding the school altogether, would motivate students and teachers to work harder. Students would learn more and the achievement gap would narrow. Well, it hasn't worked out that way. Instead, high-stakes testing has caused more harm than good. In fact, it is becoming increasingly obvious that high-stakes testing is the central contributor to the, quote, failure of our schools. Because it is the test scores that count, teachers teach to the test, focusing on English language arts and math, and marginalizing all the other subjects, including science, social studies, the arts, health, and PE. Because what gets tested is what gets taught, classroom activities focus on test prep. Students learn strategies for passing multiple choice tests rather than tackling in-depth projects, such as ones focusing on local history, climate change, or novels. Students do not gain a sophisticated understanding of the world, as they are not permitted to ask and answer essential questions. Students become passive recipients of the curriculum, rather than active participants. What is to be learned and how it is learned is determined by corporations that create the tests. Teachers, parents, and students have little or no input into what they are to learn. Teachers are deprofessionalized as teaching is reduced to what is on the test. The current practices regarding assessment are driving teachers out of the profession and discouraging others from entering it. Teacher education programs are struggling to attract enough students to stay open. Students, parents, and educators are pushing back against high-stakes testing. Over the last several years, about 20% of the students statewide and 50% on Long Island opted out of the Common Core exams. This is an incredibly high number, given how much pressure most school districts place on parents, students, and teachers to not boycott the tests. Many districts, such as the Rochester City School District, don't even inform students and their parents that they can refuse to take day tests. In my forthcoming book, Opting Out, the Story of the Parents' Grassroots Movement to Achieve Whole Child Public Schools, parent activists from Long Island opt-out and NICED describe how they have successfully undermined the whole testing apparatus. Instead of high-stakes testing, we should follow the example of the Performance Consortium schools, 28 schools in New York that received a waiver from the graduation requirement of passing 5 Regents exams. And the one example of the Performance Consortium school that we have in Rochester is School Without Walls, and we have the past principal of School Without Walls here. In this way, assessment becomes part and not the end of the learning process. Together, students and teachers develop educational goals that meet the standards, design and implement curriculum to meet those goals, and integrate assessment into classroom activities. Assessing students and teachers should be more than assigning a number from 1 to 4. Instead, it should be a process that provides meaningful quantitative and qualitative feedback to everyone about learning and teaching. So I've left, this would be usually, I would say it's a shameless plug, and I have flyers for my book that's in press on the opt-out movement, and my book on corporations, the corporate takeover of public education. So I have flyers about those out there, since that's obviously one of the topics of today's talk. It's not quite that shameless, and I hope you find them interesting. So thank you.
We're going to move on to 10. We'll come back to 9 later. But number 10 is dealing with English as second language learners. And Henry Padron, former kindergarten teacher in the city school district and bilingual administrator as well, is here to talk to us. So, Henry?
Mine is PowerPoint.
Okay. PowerPoint. Here we go.
Here we go. New English language learners. Before we can talk about all the philosophical, ideological, whatological things there are to do with this population, do we even know what it means to be a new English language learner? This continent, before the arrival of the European, was multilingual. It was multilingual out of necessity for the indigenous First Nations people to communicate across borders with other groups. They weren't called tribes yet. The notion of bilingual, as I speak, is from a moment in history from 1974 till now. In California, Lau versus Nichols, 1974, is a case that comes up because a Chinese family's children were not being taught in a language that they comprehended in their academic world. Lau versus Nichols. Groundbreaking case that opens up the bilingualism that we have today. Next. In New York City, the Aspira consent decree happens in 74 as well. Aspira was fundamental for New York City's bilingual education system to get unfolded. Next. This was brought about by the Puerto Rican community's insistence on the fact that their children needed to be taught in the language and with the culture that they brought to a school. In New York State, then, we are driven by what are known as Commissioner's Regulations Part 154. It is the modus operandi, it is the functional text that drives everything that a school district in New York State has to do to be in compliance with the needs of English language learners. Next. IMAS. There's CR Part 200 that ensures that those same children who have needs that are considered special needs also be acknowledged and given the services that are required by law. Next. Compliance is a list. It used to be 23 areas of compliance. They've been streamlined. And as you can see, now I'm not reading these to you. You have to look at them and read them for yourself. But they're available. There are un sinnúmero of compliances that any district has to abide by, or else they're out of compliance and tend to lose funding. Rochester City School District depends, I believe right now the number is close to $20 million to support. Next. Bilingüismo. This is the basic fundamental. What is a bilingual program? What is bilingüismo when it's thought of? It's definitely a research-based program. We have across the Canadian border Dr. Jim Cummings, who is an incredible researcher in this world. And he's been here once or twice. Maybe we need to stretch out to the Ontario Ministry of Education for support. Next. So, English language learners are a diverse group of students with different language, academic, and social emotional needs. Next. In Rochester, the ELL, the new language learners, the emerging bilinguals, are the fastest growing student population in this district. Speak over 80 languages in this district. Nepali, Somali, and Arab speakers are the next groups following Spanish. In the Spanish, the majority are Puerto Ricans. We have Dominicans, Republicans, and representatives from all the Spanish-speaking countries. Hurricane Maria added an immediate
the country demonstrate that students assigned to smaller classes do better in every measurable way. They score higher on tests, receive better grades, and exhibit improved attendance and behavior. Makes common sense, but it's got to be said. Myth number 2, there's a magic number or threshold that has to be reached. The elimination of teacher, expansion of charter schools, and online learning. There is no evidence that these methods will lead to more learning or narrow the achievement gap. The last myth, class size reduction is too expensive. That's the one I hear the most. While many studies have shown that the smaller classes are cost effective because the gains in achievement would be expected to result in higher wages later in life. And as I just mentioned of Alan Kruger at Princeton, estimated the economic benefits outweigh the cost 2 to 1. So, since our recommendations, lowering class size is one of the few educational reforms that have been proven to work and to narrow the achievement gap, as well as yield economic benefits twice the cost. Investing in smaller classes should be a top priority for all Rochester schools K-12. Learning is accomplished through relationships between teachers and individual students. We can make an immediate improvement in every student's learning conditions by making a significant increase in funding and making a priority to reduce class size in every Rochester City school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Our last presentation was supposed to be by Amy Malloy. Some of you may know that Amy is a candidate for Board of Education. I think the election is coming up next week. Well, she was elected as the Democratic candidate for the election, which is, for many people, I think that's a victory, but it's not official yet. So we have to go through the process. But Amy is unable to make it because of family medical crisis, and she informed me earlier today. And yours truly is going to pinch hit for her on the subject of diplomas. And here we go. Okay, there's volumes of research that strongly indicate that students are more likely to significantly engage in their education if they find the subject matter relevant to their needs and interests, or as a few of our professors, Ed Deasy and Rich Ryan would say, more intrinsically motivating. Concurrently, as Walida earlier quoted today from the City School District mission statement, our students should graduate with the skills needed to participate in a democratic society and a global economy. Are we doing either? Are we providing students with an intrinsically motivating education that prepares them for participating in a democratic society and a global economy? In order to answer that question, we have to have answers to the following questions. A, what are the skills and knowledge needed to effectively participate in a democratic society and global economy? And B, does the City School District emphasize these through their curriculum and assessments? And C, to what degree are students satisfied with their City School District education, and to what degree are they successful as citizens in careers or in college? The following are skills determined by political scientists, college officials, global economists, and corporate managers. How many do you think are emphasized in the Rochester City School District curriculum or assessments? Critical thinking? How about creative problem solving? Networking and collaboration? How about adaptability? And what about personal initiative? How about oral and written communication? Maybe we can deal with written to some degree. How about assessing and analyzing information? And what about curiosity and imagination? Where on the assessments that kids are given in the city school district that drive teaching and learning do we see these types of skills that we find are necessary for kids to succeed in this global technological urban environment that we live in? And if we look at the data in terms of high school and college graduates from the city school district, employment and mid-level salary range, incarceration rates, and social emotional surveys of students, they do not give a successful picture of the current Rochester educational system. Our coalition's recommendation to address this complex issue of student engagement and success is only a piece of the puzzle. However, we do believe it will make things better for city school district students, and we urge the city school district to seek a variance from the Board of Regents to allow these additional diploma tracks. One would be for those parents and students who wanted a continuation of the current New York State Regents standardized test-driven system. A second would be the creation of a model based on the New York State Performance Standards Consortium model, of which School Without Walls is a practicing member, where there's a great deal of curricular flexibility to meet student interests and societal needs, and an assessment system that's performance-based and focuses on the skills needed to be successful as citizens and learners, using the evaluation system as a tool to learn as opposed to simply define what a student got as a grade is a big difference. And also the creation of a high standards, and I'm emphasizing high standards vocational track, modeled after the School Without Walls Consortium model, but geared toward the vocational, citizenship, and career skills that students find meaningful and engaging. And last, the creation of an alternative diploma for special needs students whose parents, teachers, and human development specialists agree is needed for that student to develop the basic skills for survival and function in a complex technological society. So, with those 11 recommendations, what we'd like to do, and we hope folks don't leave, because this is probably more important than hearing what we had to say. That's important, what we just said, but also we really need you to give us feedback in terms of what you think of these recommendations and what could modify them and enhance them, or maybe eliminate them if you can provide evidence for that. So with that, we'd like to have you in groups, but we're not sure, where you are. How many people, by a show of hands, are most interested in giving feedback on the thing I just talked about, alternative diploma tracks, and high-stakes standardized testing that David talked about? Can I see your hands if that's your priority issue that you want to give feedback on? Is there anybody in that area? No, I guess we convinced him, David, that should be. Oh, there's one, okay, all right, well, okay, let's hold on that. How about what Howie presented on in terms of education leaders to assist the superintendent and the board, as well as, well, how many for that? How many for education leaders? That we ought to have a financial leader and a person who's schooled in curriculum and instruction. How about, okay, we got one over there. How about the advisory council that I talked about, in which there would be research presented to the board every month and the superintendent in terms of what's important, what does research say that works for these kids? Maybe we got 2 or 3. Okay, so education leaders. How, you going to be around for a little while?
I get about 10 minutes, that's it.
Okay, well, why don't we start with you, and Koji, if you could help with this. Could that group that wants to work on education leaders and the advisory group, could they meet at that table in the back corner over there? You can just get up and kind of walk over there to that back table, okay? Anybody who wants to work on that. Right over there. Okay? How about literacy, the thing that Don Barlow talked about in terms of needing literacy? How many people were with that? Okay, we got 2 or 3. And how many people with ESL, what Henry presented that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, could that group, the combined group of ESL and literacy, could they meet, why don't we meet right here where Don is? Okay, right here. Don, hold your hand up so people know where you are. Right over here. So that's with literacy and English as second language. Okay, how many people thought the priority issue was racism and sexism, dealing with that? So we got 2, okay, and a couple more over here. And how about with Great Schools for All that Don Pryor presented on in terms of inter-district magnet schools? Okay, could those people who are with either inter-district magnet schools and racism, could they meet, Don, could you hold your hand up? Okay, right there in the middle with Don. Okay, community schools, which, where's John?
Right here.
John Boutte
Right here.
talked about, as well as parent relationships in which Walida talked about.
Parents can go in and they can get dental care at the school or health checkups at the school, so they're it's part of their community. I think that's all related to this goal of the vision of including parents in the district. So I definitely see a lot of overlap with this idea of neighborhood schools and engaging parents.
So I'm going to put areas of focus, like areas to say, as a parent, what do you need some more support from? Right. So right here, areas of focus. What are the areas of focus you would hope to pursue in doing this? So you said neighborhood schools, right?
Are you saying in general what you want the district to focus on, or focusing on such and such towards a particular goal? What is that?
Right, so, yes. So basically this exercise, what we realize is that parents and community are not even in the mission and vision.
They're not in the what?
And that's what you're saying regarding, with the community schools, we have all of these resources that are available to the students, but they're not available to the parents, to my knowledge.
A plaque on the wall to be
They should be public-facing resources, so that like school-based health centers should be open to the public. There should be meeting spaces available to communities. There should be a barber shop, or there should be laundry school. Whatever services that the families might be able to
It makes sense that it's a neighborhood school, not just a community school 2 miles away where only the kids can get there by bus. I mean, to bring that community school in the neighborhood, you really can bring parents and families.
You got a swimming pool at a school that should be open to the public when the children aren't using it, for instance. There's ways that you can structure, when you're doing these school modernizations, right? You can structure the school in such a way that it's open to the public while still keeping it kind of perimeter off and the school's going.
And I guess the other thought is you were speaking regarding the community school being available to parents that are in need, and this is a stretch. Parents that have addictions, getting that support. This is the reality. This is what our
so the resources being family,
right?
Do you think there might be some public safety issues bringing addicted people into a building to put their kids in it?
Well, that's what I said. This being a stretch.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's the reality.
Yeah. But the thing is, exactly, and to your point, all services are not right there, right?
Right.
So if your child is attending a community school that has multiple services, doesn't mean they have to actually go to that school. I know that Rochester Regional Health is at East.
Right.
I can go in as a parent, sign up for their services, and go
to East to get the
or,
services
or to go to another site.
school. Right.
But I was able to get that resource through the school.
That was your first entry point.
First entry point.
And so if it's expanded out to the different schools, which means that that's a lot of computers talking to each other, you know? Yeah, but that's what needs to happen.
So based on here, on let me see one of those sheets. And I'm not saying we have to come up with a mission today or a new vision statement today, but actually what would that look like? And this activity is something that you just can't condense within. It has to be something that is ongoing so that then you come up with an end result. And the idea is that the coalition will give these recommendations to the district. You know, I've seen the coalition do it many times. I mean, whether they do it, you know, they accept it or not, they hear it. They have actually met with coalition members. So, you know, it's totally, but I think this here may start to turn a little heads because a lot of times they're not thinking this. And that's the first thing that stood out for me.
Is there something about, like in this mission, it's to ensure that the students graduate with skills to be successful? How about, can we say something about the district not passing students when they're not ready for the next academic level?
Absolutely, like social, absolutely. And so to the point of Dan, when he was saying that now you have students, I mean, not Dan, Don, that you have students coming into college remedial.
And paying for
Yeah, exactly.
using all of their grants.
And guess what? Not even the remedial courses are not even attached to financial aid.
Right. Yep. You don't get credit. You have to pay for
You
how
don't
much
get
you use
credit.
financial
More
aid.
of like
Yeah.
you use up all
Yep.
of the grants that you have on the remedial courses, so you don't have anything left for the real
Impacts their financial aid negatively.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So that word quality
So they're not just
education
poor
is
and
just
uneducated,
so
they're in debt. They're worse off than when they walked
to
in.
really specify what kind of a quality education where you're teaching that kids have the skills in reading and
So
writing.
specify.
Yeah, just to elaborate.
For me, like this is goes beyond vision. Like we want some elements of that, like kind of a nods to elements of that in a vision statement, but these sort of things are really policies.
Yeah.
Saying like you're not gonna do social promotion. You're gonna do that's a policy, not something that really goes in a vision or a mission statement, in my opinion.
But what we could do, to her point,
But
and to your point, is to specifically identify
that's what I think
that
it should
looks
do.
like.
Yeah, because for me, like amending the vision is kind of like I think that's a pretty easy ask. You can be like, why are you including parents in the vision? You get that amended, but it's like, well, what do we want them to actually do to carry out the mission? And so that's like where the specifics come in.
That takes a workshop.
That takes a workshop.
Where the status of parent liaisons and like the funding for them and the staffing, the staffing that is dedicated to working with parents at each school. Has it changed?
From what I understand,
Or is there a parent liaison?
from what I understand,
Should be at
every school. And it was a breakfast or like a panel discussion with parents, and that I was actually a part of. To answer your question, I don't know specifically. I know that platform was for parents to engage with parent liaisons and to actually push the fact that, number one, they're overworked. And they're being pulled away from their daily tasks that they actually should be doing, as opposed to staying in the attendance room all day, or they're being put in other areas that is taking them away from engaging with parents, and it's actually interfering with building governance. So that's the key thing too, as far as parents, when they are to really identify what the issues are so that they can verbalize it. So as opposed to going into school and saying, oh, this happened. Well, if I had a parent liaison, I may have been able to solve that problem. And that is building governance. So that's another issue. But as far as what they're doing to fix it, staffing.
What was your question? I'm sorry. What were you saying? You were asking about the funding?
Or how many staffing for dedicated staff to work with parents and resolving the issues that they have day to day, I think is a big piece of supporting.
To my understanding, there's supposed to be a parent liaison in every school. Are you district employee?
No, I work in some of the schools.
Okay, yeah. I know I can say
You're a
that-
parent liaison. Hey.
Okay, so you can.
All righty, expert. Here we go.
No, I'm a homeschool assistant. There's a difference. Parent liaisons are at elementary. Where I'm at central office, I oversee them.
Oh, okay.
So
It's
what
the
is their
statement that I
primary
make.
job in the school, like in the school?
Whatever the principal says.
Okay, so it varies
Yeah.
school to school?
Yeah.
Like,
Whatever the principal says.
So
See
I
that?
think uniform, there should be a uniform job description.
There
How are they gelling?
There is.
You see what I'm saying?
There is. But the governance.
Just engage a teacher or a principal, they have to go through the parent liaison.
Well, they can engage the teacher and the principal, but you would really like your support from your parent liaison. I mean, as a parent, I've actually been advocating for, not at my son's when he was at the elementary school level, because the principal and the parent liaison were great. But at the secondary level, it was like the parent liaison, she was so stretched. And the principal was not really tapping into, all he kept saying was the lack of parent engagement, lack of parent engagement, and she literally was being so innovative. She was having PTO meetings at basketball games. You know, she was like, hey, the basketball game starts at 6, let's just meet 15 minutes before. You know, she was listening to parents. She was doing anything that she could, and a lot of her strategies worked. But she was getting so torn.
At the same time, she's supposed to be attending to each of the individual
And after she got off attendance, she would have like 5 home visits for the students who hadn't been in school in weeks. And then now after you do those home visits, now you at what? Dismissal. And now all the concerns are flooding her voice message. And she can't even get to them because it starts all over again the next day. She got to collect cell phones. She has to, you know, and we're talking about a school that has 700 black boys.
That don't want to give up their phone.
That don't. You understand what I mean? And I'm saying emphasis on that because number one, boys, young boys. I'm just saying, we're going to leave that right there. And it takes a lot of energy. However, they have such a level of respect for her because she's like a mom to them. So she doesn't have to go through too much, but she's very stressed. And I was actually happy that the district did have that platform for parents to talk with parent liaisons. And the parents are basically advocating for them, which they should.
One of the things that I've experienced over my 18 years as a special educator is our elementary schools are functioning well in the capacity of the parent liaison. You spoke to that. But when we get to the middle school and the high school, I'm not quite sure what happens with the parent support. It's almost as though they think that their young adults, I'm thinking, don't need them. And I'm saying to them, that's when they need you the most. They're making crucial decisions on their education as far as what classes to take. And, you know, parents may not be able to advise them in that way. However, you still need to be there. You need to be there. So Johnny will know. My mom was there with me. When I had to sit down with that counselor, mommy was there. I'm sorry. You know, mommy was there. And we've lost that connection. And it's unfortunate because, as I said, I'm a special ed teacher over at Wilson High School. And we're still working the schedule. We're almost 3 months into school, and we're still working schedules. And I'm like, tell your mama, because see, they're not hearing me. Tell your mama to call, text, email and get you in this class. That's how real it is.
Can you reach out to the parents directly? Do you email
Oh,
them?
absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I've done. Being a special ed teacher, you know, I have a caseload of up to 10 students that I have to try and monitor and help in the classroom, but also we'll be in contact with the parent, things of that nature. So yeah.
But the homeschool assistants, their barrier is they're supposed to be there to advocate for the parent, and that role has been changed to support the staff. So my job, as Ms. Monroe knows, is homeschool assistant, mediation and communication between the staff and the parent. But my title is parent representative, which means I work for the parent, and I am a parent too. But if the principal tells me that's as far as that mediation is going to go, that's as far as that mediation is going to go. And that's just it's different. At Wilson, Ms. Vanderwater is very supportive of her staff and her homeschool assistant. The same thing at Wilson Foundation, but you have other buildings that don't have that same. And that's in the Distinguished Educators Report.
Yes.
The roles of the parent liaison and the homeschool assistant was supposed to be revamped.
Yes.
Changed back to civil service standards because we work for civil service. We don't work for the principal. We don't work for the deputy. We don't work for the director. We work for civil service. But no one has challenged that yet.
No one has what?
Challenged it yet.
So that's also like not known,
Right.
right?
You know, there's so many things that need to be revamped within our, I mean, we need an overhaul. I mean, he wasn't wrong with what he presented to us.
No.
Nope.
We do need an overhaul. I mean, we need to stop at the very bottom and move it.
Absolutely.
I just
And people are upset with that. And it's,
Folks, can I interrupt just for 1 second, and then you can continue? Take 5 more minutes to finish up your discussion and any of the questions perhaps that you haven't addressed. I realize some of them you may not have had the opportunity to address, but go as far as you can in the next 5 minutes. And then what we'd like to hear is a report out from each group in terms of the main ideas that they developed or that they would like to share with the entire group. And again, coalition members will be listening, we're writing these down. And please don't forget that in your packets there is a feedback form with the 11 recommendations, and feel free to write a book in the back, to whatever you have.
Don't forget,
giving us feedback. But
we're also
take 5 more
community
minutes
schools
so we can
here.
hear
Yeah,
from
we
our
incorporated that into the.
Now, one of the things I want to point out, just as we talk about making a difference in how parents can get involved, what time did you leave to try to get here today?
I left MCC at 4 o'clock in Brighton.
And she's a bus user.
Oh wow! Exactly.
And but I made a stop at the downtown MCC campus to vote. But on the bus coming here from there, I saw the bus I was hoping to connect with already leaving before I was even at the transit center. The bus left completely off schedule, and everybody was doubled and tripled up.
oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, the thing that we
But
really...
for people that are dependent on public transportation,
Yeah.
it can be very
accessibility.
problematic.
It is. And so we know the barriers too with that, right? And so a lot of times we're asked to come to the district because it's in a central location. However, when we talk about neighborhood schools, you see there's a disconnect because you could still tap into the schools at a building level from a district level, right? So the thing is, if we're talking about neighborhood schools with community models, right? You have those same children walking, the parents are walking. And then now how is the district going to engage with those parents? Look at number 33 school. Their PTO is rocking and rolling.
Right.
Why? You know how many children go to 33 schools? And those parents walk.
Yeah,
The parents are walking there. Look at number 9 school, how they just turned their whole receivership around. But the question is the district engaging with those parents, and how are they? So are they sending their board-sanctioned parent groups out to meet with these PTOs or to meet with these PTAs? So that's what I'm saying as far as like a disconnect. And another thing I found is this word here. Now, people may agree or disagree. Right here, for me, that's a barrier.
But the other aspect is we have wonderful things happening in various schools. Why aren't we modeling that throughout the districts?
Maybe the unions are preventing some of this stuff.
Because as 33 has been turned around, and 17 is turning around, and 17 is a community school, and I believe 33 is a community school.
Well,
And
what are the realistic reasons why they're, I mean,
Absolutely.
it could be money. That's probably a huge factor, right, the budget. So addressing those things that the district is saying, these are the reasons we can't. Well, so we got to figure out what are those reasons we can't, and how do we combat it and say, yes, we can.
No, we have a parent university catalog.
Right.
But it's not utilized. It's a catalog that is supposed to advertise for every school, every event, for parents, to parents.
Right, and they have
And
workshops
it has
for
its
them.
own it has its own budget.
I think it's tough to do parent engagement at a district level.
It's phenomenal,
I
challenging.
think it's got to be based on the school. It's got to be the school leadership has to set the tone. The school leadership has to support the parent liaison and have them doing what is
District level.
But
Yeah,
the principals will say how they've got good programs going, and then somebody gets funked by somebody in the union with seniority, and
Now she's talking.
upsets the whole apple cart.
Well, you know what? We know that that's one of the number one barriers.
The district right here.
And I'm not anti-union, I'm in a union.
Right.
At some point, the reality is,
That's right.
if it's not working for these children, it's got to change.
So now we have policies and practices in place in the best interest of adults and children. And that's been an issue all along. There's some phenomenal teachers and administrators out there.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying to get rid of the unions.
No
And I'm
doubt.
saying some of those contracts really protect them. But then you got some teachers that I don't know how and why they're present. And then when things happen, disciplinary issues come up, they're protected by a contract. Or guess what?
It depends on who you are. Trust me, it depends on who
Absolutely,
you are.
absolutely. And then you're also, as far as funding, how much is that costing? How much are a lot of those contracts? What is that costing? What does that
Folks, you got about 30 seconds to
Which we
finish up
probably
the conversation that you're in.
So, if we could, in a little bit of minutes, what would be our ideal? And this is just for giggles, for us to come up with something. But we've
And make
talked
sure
about
that
all
you
of
have
this.
somebody who's willing to
And it
report
doesn't have
out
to
from
be,
each group. It doesn't
but
have to
maybe
be
just
a
the vision
facilitator.
itself.
It can be a member of the group.
What would that ideal vision look like?
John?
Pardon?
What would that look like? Real quick. Rochester City School District seeks to.
We really need to get back to having local
Folks, if I
school
could have your
involvement.
attention, we'd like to hear from each group.
And what we've
So
run
you
into
could,
over the years is
finish
if
the
you say
conversation or reserve it for
kids have got to walk
after
to the
meeting,
school,
that would be great.
parents,
So,
you know,
I'm gonna
there's
start
a
over
hue
here
and
with,
cry.
this group, and what I'm
Because
asking
parents
each group to
are
do is
depending
to
on the
tell us
healthy.
what their focus was in terms of giving feedback and what the key points were, the key recommendations, concerns,
So our key
suggestions,
points.
what those might be.
Hey, everybody leave.
So,
Y'all
we'll
leaving.
start over here.
Don't do that.
So we talked about alternative diplomas, and we listed 4 specific kinds of alternative diplomas with some additional qualities we want to see included. So vocational, local, performance model, certificate of employability. Under the performance model, we see apprenticeships, career technical education, and global citizenship and study abroad as something that are opportunity areas that are not being pursued here or in other nearby areas. So we're concerned about students being excluded from career and technical education because of mandated compliance in ESL hours and because of Regents diploma expectations for which they are put in multiple tutoring programs so that they can get those Regents credits, which exclude them from career training and opportunities to network into a career that they want to go into. So we see that some of the Regents and ESL compliance credit and hours creating segregation and isolating the ESL student, the ELs, and students with disabilities as well from career and technical education. We talked about alternative diplomas including literacy, and there aren't strong programs for home language instruction in the district. So while this is not an alternative diploma, we are concerned that in the Pathway to diplomas, students need better access to multilingual home language instruction, including independent language study, which could be applied also to native speakers who might want to learn languages that are not.
We were really able to deal with this. One of the things is, there are a lot of similarities between learning, just in general, literacy learning, and learning another language. And one of the things that we know is how important it is to have background information. And that's an area that I think the district has made a terrible mistake, because the program they have introduces first grade children to the rivers in China. Now that's a mistake. Another thing is, and Henry brought this out, that we'll find in other languages that there's a lot more peer teaching. In other words, and it's not always the older students, but it's some. There are differences, and Dr. Amy told us this, between bilingual and ESL. And we need to know other approaches. One of the things I introduced, and I learned a long time ago, working with kids from all over, when someone is literate in their own language, they have a step up, don't they? Sure, they know how it works. Oh, those symbols, oh yeah, I do that. I get it, the one-to-one corresponds. And it's very important that we find out that information. Henry told us about working with kids who are on the verge of being deported and how difficult that is. We all agreed with this, and I hope we can put this better in our recommendations. We all at this table believe that there should be 2 teachers in every kindergarten, first, and second grade class. 2, not 1, 2. And that doesn't mean giving them 40 kids. There's a great deal of difficulty, and I think it was Amy that brought this up. There's a great deal of difficulty getting teachers for, let's take Puerto Rico, okay? I can't say it like he does, but I love the way he said it. They came over, they were certified teachers, but New York State won't let them work. It's not easy to get certified. So these are teachers from Puerto Rico, but they can't work here. Not yet. We had a real different discussion in Writing to Learn. We need to be careful of that, because it's not quite that simple. It doesn't stop, okay? I think those were our main points.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that for this group, the whole group. I'm going to move over here to the Inter-District Magnet School group and the group that focuses on racism, sexism, etc.
Okay, I just sent away my notes, but that's all right. I think I can do this. So we were looking at our question groups, and we focused initially on racism. We realized there's all the other isms, but racism is the big one in the room, and that's what we talked about. And we didn't spend a lot of time talking about question one, what potential does this recommendation have, because it's just kind of obvious we need to do something. Number two is what concerns do you have about this recommendation? We went back and read the official recommendation in this write-up that we got in our books, collaboratively creating with the assistance of the Advisory Council, RTA, ASAR, and Bente, a policy and plan for eliminating blah, blah, blah. And we realized, well, there's no parents there. There is no community there. There's a lot of white folks there. So that was a concern. And that kind of maps on to how would you suggest to improve this recommendation was basically including more people of color. We have a lot of discussion about, who should be leading what, white people talking to white people, or people of color being able to lead the charge, where's the power? But we had, I think, a really meaningful discussion that didn't necessarily get to solid conclusions. But we did say that we need more people of color involved in the conversation, and we happen to have two organizers at our table who are both people of color, both very busy women of color who have gone off already, and they've agreed to reach out to their networks, and we're going to try to reconvene and have a richer discussion with those resources. We also talked about grade schools for all and the magnet schools. They are related to the racism piece, but we pretty much treated them just differently, different topics. We didn't get as far down in terms of thinking about what to do with that. Some of the concerns that were raised were around, is it just a Band-Aid? Is it going to siphon away kids that have motivated parents, similar to what urban, suburban, and charter schools and all those other schools? Would kids be able to come back? Don addressed some of those concerns, saying he really sees it as a public school. Kids would be there, you wouldn't have the phenomenon that you have with charter schools where it's like they get counseled back. No, you're not quite a kid. So that addresses some of those concerns, and I think that was his thoughts that it would really be a unique school, and you could do that. And I think your other line was viewing it as a both and situation where we need to both work on improving city schools and providing more choice by having these magnet schools.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm going to run over here to the education leaders. Spokesperson is over here for
I got voluntold.
education leaders and the advisory committee. Okay.
Okay, I don't have any notes. Our conversation went kind of all over the place. We were talking about leadership, and we were also talking the appointed leaders to kind of support the superintendent and the Board of Ed, and then also the advisory council idea. So the conversation went from having kind of like what could be considered another top-down appointee, kind of like working with different leaders in the district. We just had questions kind of about like the structure, how it would be selected. A comment that was similar to some of the other groups that came up is kind of balancing out where the parent and community voice is in something like that. Is it more present, maybe in a larger group like an advisory council, but then do you get into kind of unwieldy management of a group that large? How does that group fit in with all the other groups that already exist in the city that are already supposed to be impacting our CSD? And we had some representation, I think, from Rock the Future at the table, just talking about like we have a collective impact already. Like again, thinking about using existing forms, strengthening those, pouring in there. Is there a solution or pathway there already? But then again, that piece about representation and power structure, like who is involved in appointing someone like this, and how connected or where are they of what parents in our community want for their children right now on this day, and making sure that it's not research has its strong place and needs to be present, but also current experience of students and families in the district and what they want for their child moving forward has to be equally as present in a solution like that, or it kind of goes nowhere. Like research can be, can get you so far, but the lived experience of what's going on for families right now who have a kid in the district and that investment. And the last thing, and this was kind of my comment, but since I have the mic to share, is just kind of like thinking about when we were talking about leadership, it's like a lot of the conversation was above the school, and like what about the best practices we know about what can be happening inside of a school to impact outcomes at that level, like making sure that there is some kind of conversation and a recommendation about that, like what research tells us about a high-quality leader in a school able to make decisions, about high-quality professional development for teachers that's not centralized from a district, but it's about the cohort of students that are in that building, et cetera, et cetera. So making sure that those kind of things kind of come through in a kind of like leadership-facing recommendation. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to know. Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And were those your kids who were sitting there?
They are.
Kudos to them for tolerating us. They were great. Okay, let's see. We've got a committee of one over here who has some feedback for us as well. So please introduce yourself and let us know what you're thinking.
So my name is Deontay Hill. I guess I just made my own group and my own subject because I am a product of the Rochester City School District, so it's just very interesting to hear everyone else's views of it when you all haven't actually been in it firsthand necessarily. So I really think everything needs to be reformed and reassessed because like not just one single thing is going to help change or help make the Rochester City School District better. Like as I said, I went to Wilson Magna High School. I was in the IB program there and went on to graduate from the University of Rochester. So I'm like, if you want to learn, you can and you will, and you can be successful from there. But again, like, yeah, class size could make a difference, but you know, parents have to be as involved as children's will to learn, as well as teachers wanting to see their students succeed. So, you know, the focus used to always be like, oh, we gotta get you to college, but college isn't for everyone. So the way that I see it is, how are we gonna make you like a successful adult to be able to support yourself and raise a family in the world that we're in? But yeah, I substitute in the district, and I've noticed that the schools that have like stronger parent-to-school bonds seem to be the better schools, quote unquote. Like they're more in control. They have more students succeeding because teachers aren't just focusing on classroom management, which is, you know, having, yo, sit down, little Johnny, stop yelling out, because if you're constantly disciplining, then you're not teaching. So, yeah, I just saw that everything here needs to be focused on.
Very much, really appreciate that. And by the way, for those people who are wondering, where are the students? You know, how about, you know, why don't we have any high school students here talking about this? I sent invitations to every high school principal in the district, and I had 0 responses. So that might be an interesting question to explore in terms of why that happens. You know, where's the motivation for civic engagement and participation in developing recommendations for improving their own education. Not that students aren't interested, but where's the leadership in terms of making that kind of thing happen? So how about the class size group? We have somebody here?
So in terms of potential, we all were pretty unanimous in thinking that this has a lot of potential because we were just talking about the stress that can be put on teachers if they're dealing with large class sizes, but we were also talking about the engagement of students. And you're more likely to become engaged, you're more likely to participate in discussions if you're not competing with a bunch of other students, and you're more likely to form a stronger bond with your teacher, which we were saying we think is pretty valuable, because you have some classes where you can kind of get lost in the crowd and you don't really ever get the chance to participate and make your voice heard. And in terms of maybe some concerns that we were talking about would just be maybe where would that funding come from? Because if you want to lower class sizes, you have to probably hire more teachers or rework your staff in some way. So we were just talking about you have to, one, get the funding, but two, get the administration, most importantly, on board to create more work for them. But we, in general, thought that the pros outweighed the cons. And most people, it's easy to get your head around, like, lowering class sizes, and most people, it's not a very controversial improvement to make. Most people want their kids to be in a classroom that has less students. Most teachers probably want less students in their classroom. So.
We also thought of some of the improvements that could be added to the AD, and we thought of flexible grouping, so kids in different small groups could have opportunities to work with others as well. As for actions, we thought that raising awareness through discussion would really help to make this a reality, and also taking small steps and not aiming for cutting your class in half right away, but even 1 or 2, 3 students, and that would lead to success as well. We also thought of utilizing volunteers and making partnerships, for example, with universities. As some of the school districts already do, they use volunteers to assist in classes, and that helps to build more relationships and just make education more meaningful. What we would personally do, as we are all here students, we would definitely like to volunteer ourselves and also educate ourselves more on the issues, so when we do come in education, we come prepared.
Good evening. My name is Valeria Hill, and I am an educator in the Rochester City School District. I've been in Wilson for 3 years, my first high school, and then over to Franklin, Douglas, and currently at Wilson Commencement, as I said. We were looking at the Rochester City School District and the mission and the vision statement, and Walida. She was our facilitator, and the charge that she gave us, she continually asked us, what do we see, what's not in the mission and the vision statement? And some of the words that we came up with was parents, community, relationship, partnership, culture, and education. And so we kind of talked around all of those words, in particular, parent involvement, parent engagement, and it is so important being a parent. That's my daughter. Being a parent and a child that went through the district, and also being a product of the city school district. I graduated from Jefferson High School, knowing how important it is for parents to be involved. And what I shared with them is, when I was in elementary, realizing that we take care of our elementary students. They're coddled, they're taken care of. However, and the parents are involved, but once our young people go to middle school and high school, there seems to be a disconnect. Parents, and it may not be a true statement, but this is what I'm seeing, the parents feel as though their young people are young adults and they can navigate through their educational learning, and such is not the case. And perhaps parents aren't comfortable. Now their child is in high school and they're not comfortable with supporting them there. But that's when they need them the most. because these young people are now selecting courses or having to take courses that's necessary for them to graduate. So they need mom, dad, uncle, grandma sitting next to them, just if they're just sitting there, knowing that they have the support, talking to the counselors to help them in that respect. Some other areas that we talked about was community schools, and they're wonderful. I know 33 is thriving, 17 is thriving also, but I threw in the hat neighborhood schools, and there is a difference between community schools and neighborhood schools, and perhaps we need to mesh them together. I think it's important that we have neighborhood schools because it's taking back your neighborhood. Young people are able to walk to that school. We know that the city of Rochester, there's some danger, true enough. However, if we have those neighborhood schools, and parents can walk to the school with their children, or when they have the parent-teacher conference meeting, they're able to get there, as opposed to worrying about going to the other side of the city to the school where their child is and they have no transportation. And we also talked about parent liaison. To my understanding, but I could be wrong, I thought that every school had a parent liaison in it that was supporting the parents that came into the school. However, we had a representative who, I forget her name, but she indicated that she kind of supervised the parent liaison. She was the manager over that whole area, and she said the role has changed. It's based on what the principal wants that parent liaison to be doing in their building. And that's like, wow, did not know that. But that's interesting to know because, once again, that's another area that needs to be fixed. And as my daughter said, everything we're talking about needs to be fixed. We need an overhaul. People don't want to hear that, but the district really does. We need to start at the bottom and work our way up with improving every school and educating every child in our district, which that's major, it really is, but that's what we need. So we talked about challenging parent engagement at the Rochester City School District level. We said that that's very challenging. How can the district really be involved in parent engagement at the district level when you really need it at each school? And seeing that there are good parent liaison activity going on, why aren't they modeling that from school to school? Just like best practices, why aren't we modeling those from school to school?
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody want to make any comment in terms of reaction to small group discussions or anything else that you feel was missed that you want to let us know about? Anybody? If you don't feel comfortable talking in front of a large group, there's all
somebody over there.
Where? Yes, go ahead, Carla.
So I don't know. I don't know if this would fit into the recommendations, but I know that some of the recommendations do seem to involve the state to some extent. And I'm wondering about making a demand for that the fair funding formula be funded, because I know some of the things that people have talked about, especially small class sizes, but it relates to other areas that were talked about too. That's not going to happen unless they start funding that formula. And I heard the superintendent say, I think it was last week, that in addition to this $30 million that was not accounted for, that next year we're looking at a $154 million deficit. There's a structural budget deficit. So, I mean, we can't even talk about smaller class sizes unless we, get the equitable funding formula in place, and that will take a fight and a half with the state. I mean, it's being discussed right now, but I'm just wondering if that should be added. That's, because, yeah.
Very helpful. Yes, you may.
For last year, I know we have a $30 million deficit, but if the funding formula was fully funded by the state actually owes the district $97 million. We'd be, $60 million in surplus.
Yeah, right. With that, go ahead, Don.
Just next steps.
Next steps.
Talks about what happens from here.
Right. Yes, that's about what I was to address. But before I do that, another comment.
I just want to respond quickly to your comment. I think we really need to think seriously about a suit against the city school district. And I don't think the New York State Constitution provisions about it, the languages about equality education for all kids, has ever really been pushed. The closest it comes is some attempts at financial equality. But it seems to me it's pretty hard to, and I've heard you can't win that in a federal court. But it's time to do something more than sit around these tables.
Thank you. We're starting to talk now and to build on Don's comment about next steps. I mean, there's some other things that both Carla and Don commented on in terms of legislative action and citizen action, lobbying, all of these things. Go ahead.
Thinking strategically, which is what we're talking about, our group talked about the need for us to figure out how we're going to speak with one voice. Because there are so many people saying, well, if the community would tell us what they want, then we would help them get that. And as it happened, we had a staff person from Rock the Future at our table. And that is a table where a lot of the interested parties in education are seated. To date, they haven't really been an advocacy organization, but to the extent that this is the group that's interested in research-based information, that's a platform that could be used. And it seems to me that one of the first questions to be asked is, who do we want to be the go-to person when we have ideas? I mean, there is this coalition, there is Rock the Future, and if we could at least agree on the platform from which we want to all speak together, then we could decide to have a lawsuit, for example. But whatever we do, we want to be speaking with one voice, and so we need to figure out where that table is that we go and have our voice.
I think you're right on with that, and I'm sure the coalition would support whatever group that is to move forward with that. Our egos are not essential with this. It's not that important. Change and meaningful reform, I think, is what we're all after. Anybody else want to comment before I sum up? John?
Yeah, we didn't really get into discussing it, but one thing that we found out when we were talking to Harry Bronson and the various people is that there's been a lot of support, or at least lip surface, to doing away with the 1.5 mile busing requirement. But it hasn't happened, and we've been talking about this I've been talking about this for 7 years. We talked a lot about getting parent involvement, but if parents can't get to the school, it's pretty hard to get parent involvement. There's that's just moldering and poisoning everything that we're trying to do. Back in the days when you didn't have the managed school choice, giving parents the right to send their kids wherever, there was less busing, but still, that 1.5 mile factor is something we have to really address.
Right. And by the way, for any of you that are interested in joining us, becoming members of the coalition, we meet approximately once every 2 weeks for about an hour and a half. And we try to focus on, for the last 2 or 3 meetings, we've been focusing on planning this, but many times it's the discussion of single recommendations on what we can do and how we can affect change. So we're in fact, we got a meeting scheduled with Wade Norwood coming up as well, so we'll be talking about that in terms of that agenda. But you're welcome to join us. What we will do with the email addresses that we have is to send out to you a summary of what we think we gathered from everybody here in terms of recommendations for our recommendations, and we'll send those back to you. Any feedback you have about those, we would appreciate feedback on as well, because maybe we didn't get it right. And we'll keep you, if you're interested in not attending our meetings, but interested in getting our minutes and our emails. Some people complain about me emailing people to death, but you'll get some, and you know, it'll keep you informed about the issues that are taking place in the city and what we're working on. So we'd love to have you. We'll use your stuff. We will follow up in terms of talking about this, in terms of of how we can move this stuff now. This is the most important thing. I mean, we've intellectualized, we've discussed, we've explored what the recommendations mean, whether or not they're meaningful, but now it's how do we get them to be moved upon by not only the city school district, but perhaps by the Board of Regents, perhaps by the legislature. What can we do about this? And who's the group to move it as well? So on behalf of the coalition, on behalf of Great Schools for All and the Southwest Common Council Education Committee, and for Department of Education, Human Services, and Health at Brockport, thank you very much for coming. This was very helpful to us. So our congratulations for you being here for 2.5 hours and helping us with this and showing your support for reform in the city school district. We really appreciate that. If you got any comments that you want to make to individual members, feel free. And if I could just meet with our presenters from the coalition, just very briefly, 1 minute as you file out. So thank you very much. Great job, folks.